Hi everyone, this is John Dickinson from Boris FX. Welcome back to another Sapphire tutorial. This time I'm going to break down how I created this spooky type look using both Sapphire Ultra Zap and Sapphire Brush. And we're going to follow that with something a little different. I'm going to walk you through step by step as I experiment to create this darker variation. So go ahead and download the project file and let's get started. Okay, so if you have the project file open in front of you, just follow along with me. And we'll start by soloing the background layer. The background layer is just a white solid. If we toggle the transparency grid, we can see that is a white solid. Above that we have the Sapphire text. And if you've watched the hot smeared text tutorial, you'll recognize this Sapphire text. Just turn off the effects. This is the same font and text setup that I used in the hot smeared text tutorial. You can see there's a tracking setting of 215. And you may notice there's some transparency there. Just press the T key. Opacity is set to 68. Okay, so the first effect is Ultra Zap. And if you have watched the hot smeared text tutorial, you may remember that I mentioned I like to start with the S effect, which gives me access to all of the Sapphire presets in one place. But in this case, I had to start with the Ultra Zap effect itself because in After Effects, we have the Ultra Zap AE path option, which I've used here. This isn't available inside of Sapphire Builder. So I had no choice than to apply Ultra Zap by itself. The key settings to take a look at here are start and end color. You can see I've set those to white. The reason I've set those to white is because I want black bolts. I want these to be like spooky black branches. But if I set start and end color to black, Ultra Zap actually disappears. I don't see anything in the comp. So setting these to white and then following that with the S invert effect has the effect of making them black. If I hit the U key, you can see there are some keyframes for branch length. Let's just turn this on. And what we might do is just quickly create a black solid just by pressing Control or Command Y. Just so we can see this. Just drag this down here. Okay, so now we can see the bolts and the branches. So there is keyframes for branch length. If you come right back to 0, we're starting with the branches being fairly long. And by the end of the animation, you can see they're just slightly longer. So it isn't a really exaggerated movement, but this sort of slow growing of these branches, I think, was spookier than having them just shoot out. We do get this kind of jerkiness in some parts of it, but I kind of like that because it makes it look a little creepier. See how this one just is almost not moving and then shoots out like that. It gives it that kind of irregularity, which makes it look a little spookier. Now, there isn't any wiggle applied to this, so you can see the bolts are stationary and so are the branches. It's just the branch length that's animated. So let's delete the black solid and just twirl up Ultra Zap and turn on S invert. And as I mentioned before, S invert's just used to change those white bolts and branches to black. All right, that's followed by Sapphire Brush. I'm going to turn that on. This is pretty subtle. Just adds kind of a grey wash to this. You can see there are these sort of painterly strokes applied, and it's most obvious around the areas where the Ultra Zap is thickest. Just come down to the layer and press U twice, twirl up Ultra Zap, and hardly any of the settings have been changed here, just layers, roughness, and intensity. So it's giving kind of a painterly smokiness to it. Just like that. It's more intense around the darker areas and then it kind of fades off, which is a nice look. Now that's followed by Sapphire Distort Blur. And if you've watched the hot smear text tutorial, you remember that I like the rotate blur direction property. That's giving us this sweeping ghostly look. Now, the layer above is identical except for branch length where I've started with shorter branches. Just turn that on. So the ones behind are these sort of long, sweeping, ghostly ones, and the ones in front don't have distort blur applied, but they're starting shorter. Once again with S invert and S brush applied. So it's starting to darken things up and thicken things up. You will notice one difference with the UltraZap effect, and that's the bolt branchiness branches only parameter is on. If we turn that off, now we can see the bolts. And you may prefer that. I just found that made everything a little too dark. I'm going to leave that on. And here's the results so far. I do like the sort of painterly feel of S-Brush, and using those 4 different layers gives us this variation in these strokes. Next we have another duplicate of the Sapphire text. This one has just the S-Brush effect applied. I'm going to roll in here and turn that on. Just come up and just turn off the S-Brush effect for a moment. You can see it's actually black text and it has the overlay blend mode. And somewhat like the hot smeared text tutorial, it's just adding in some of these harder lines again. But I felt that these hard lines didn't really match the kind of painterly look I was going for. I did want to improve readability, but I decided to add Sapphire Brush again just to break that up like that. Everything's starting to get a little bit darker. Above that, we have an adjustment layer with Sapphire Brush applied again. And this is going to give the brush treatment obviously to everything below because this is an adjustment layer. And it does have a slightly warmer paint color. See, it's just adding a little bit of warmth into that. Although we are using Sapphire Gradient above that to add some color afterwards. And this is actually Gradient Multi, not Gradient Radial. I haven't changed that name. Just change that now. Shift Control Y or Shift Command Y, and just rename that one. We'll look at that in a moment. But I decided not to change the paint color even after I'd colorized this, because if you just right click and choose Reset, you can see it just changed the look somewhat. Okay, above that we have the Sapphire text again. This has S gradient applied. I'll just turn that off. Turn the text on. Using the soft light blend mode, just turn that off. So that's actually white text. There's S gradient. Just going from black to a light gray. And let's bring that back to soft light. You could have it without S gradient, just a solid color. I'll just change this to, let's see, to a black. It just makes it a little darker up the top. It's looking a little uniform. I just thought that S gradient gave it sort of a more ghostly look. See, it's almost disappeared up the top, but you can see it more down the bottom where it's black. And you can play around with this start and end XY. You can see they're in here. If I just click on those, drag that one down, you can see we start to see even less of that text layer. If I bring it up, we'll see more. Like that. So that's the basic overall look. To colorize, I use S Gradient Multi. And let's just turn those off. Bring back our black solid. Just turn that on again. And make that normal. You can see that's adding some different areas of color here. Just select that. So I've got 0.1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 on. 5 and 6 are white. That's allowing me to put white at the start and the end and isolate these different colors to the middle of the text. Let's just delete that one. Turn these back on. think I use soft light. Like that. So see how we're still keeping the sort of black and white at the start and the end, and we're isolating the color into the middle. If we select the effect, just move these around. And of course you could animate them. And you can just sort of, art direct how this looks depending on where these different points of color are. And of course you can, change the colors as well. You want to introduce maybe a little more green. Starts to bring some green in there as well. You could do this in other ways. I just like gradient multi because it means I don't have to, have multiple solids with masks. Going to undo that. I just wanted to add a little bit of color variation in there rather than just having, a big soft single color, maybe using Sapphire Gradient Radial. See, before I actually used S Gradient Radial before I applied multi, because I prefer that kind of color variation. Okay, so this was the final result of my experimentation when I was developing this look. But what I'd like to do in this tutorial is just work with you and take this a little further. Now, before we do that, I just want to walk you through how you can quickly change this text. If you've watched the hot smeared text tutorial, it's the same procedure. If you haven't watched that, I just wanted to point out that generally when I'm working with text, I like to pre-compose my text when it's all set up with its kerning and scale, and then duplicate that comp inside this comp. And then when I make any changes inside that text pre-comp, it'll update all of the duplicates in this comp. And that's a really good way to work. But I can't work that way because I'm using the UltraZap effect, which has the mode set to UltraZap AE path. So it's looking for the unprecomposed text layer. And I could just change this text and then copy and paste onto these, but a quicker way is just to select all of them without SBrush. Type in source text and link all of them up to the bottom one, which I like to use as the parent. So using the property pick whip and not the parent pick whip, let's come down and link the source text. And you shouldn't really notice any change. If you do see that the text no longer lines up, it may be because you've changed the kerning or tracking or leading on these individual layers. They have to be the same because source text doesn't recognize those parameters. Now I can double click the bottom layer and let's see, I'll type in spooky. And there you go. So everything looks as expected. So that's how you can change the text. So let's just unsolo all of these, create a new adjustment layer, Control Alt or Command Option Y, Shift Control or Shift Option Y to rename this. I'm going to name this Distort Blur. Come up to my effects and presets, type in DISTORT-B and hit the Enter key. This is obviously going to distort everything underneath. Let's change the rotate blur direction value to about 100. Okay, but what we'll do is we'll change the mode from normal to subtract. How many times have you used the subtract blend mode? So now we can see these spooky silhouetted branches with this sort of light source, the swirling light source behind them. Let's make another adjustment layer. And we'll name this one Rays. This one will have Sapphire Rays. Let's increase the ray length to about 1. And we've got to drop the threshold because we're not seeing anything at the moment. Just drag that down. Now we can start to see it coming out in the brightest areas. See that? Let's increase the ray brightness. Nice. See how that's coming through there? Let's just turn off the gradient multi for a moment. Just drop that threshold a little more. There we go. And to add some spooky smoke, just twirl open atmosphere and just increase the atmosphere amplitude. Maybe make that about 5. And maybe just increase the frequency. Ah, nice. Now we're getting that sort of smokiness through there. Just move the time indicator and see how that looks a little further down. Maybe a little too much smokiness now. Bring that back to 2. Obviously, it's a little difficult to read. Look at those ultra zap branches moving around. They look really quite organic and creepy, this area here. There's a few hard lines in there which probably aren't needed. Obviously, it's very difficult to read. Let's have a look and see if we can make this a little easier to read. What I'll probably do is, I don't know, let's try Ultra Zap first. So we'll grab one of these layers with Ultra Zap. This one here, just duplicate this. Put this right on top. Oh, wow, it's really branchy. So I'll switch off invert. Oh, wow, look at that. It's amazing. Now this is me freestyling. I haven't done any preparation for this. So get rid of brush. And we're going to have to adjust these settings. So bolt branchiness, I'll just turn branches only off. Turn off the branch length animation. Might be good just to solo this. And right click on branchiness and reset that. Okay, bring that back. Wow, look at that. Okay, so curve amp is quite high and that's pushing that bolt away from the text. So we bring this down, we make that 1. We're just trying to introduce or reintroduce a little bit of the text outline to make that a little more readable. Let's bring the curve amp right down. If you put 0 in, it'll bring it down to 0.001. That's quite interesting, but I don't think I need any branchiness. Let's make that 0. Okay, so that will help. It's obviously standing out way too much. Let's bring that below rays. The rays are really going to react to that white text, and we don't want to get this looking too cliched. You might like that look, but it's a little too much for me. Let's see. Bring that back up above rays. What if we grab the distort blur, copy that, select the text again, paste. Probably going to be, oh no, it's not bad. We are starting to make that feel a little more like it's supposed to be there and a little bit easier to read. Let's see. Twirl up Ultra Zap. Reset that. And this is what experimenting is all about. Let's bring that right up rather than making it 0. No, I don't think that's going to work, so let's delete that one. In Ultra Zap, let's make the bolt width less, make that 2. It's a little more subtle. And how about, let's see, Ultra Glow. Maybe we can introduce a little bit of glow into this. The glow brightness is at 0. Don't like the pink, I'm going to make that white. Okay. Glow also has an atmosphere. What if we introduce a little bit of the same atmosphere in there? Let's increase the amplitude a little bit more. And what about the frequency? It's a little too much. Okay, so maybe a frequency of 2. Okay, so we're getting a little bit of spooky glow, which is quite nice. So it's starting to feel a little better integrated. We come down to, let's see, swirl up Ultra Glow. And under bolt animation, make bolt noise speed 0. Give this a go. And we'll just increase the amount of bolt noise. This could break up the bolts a little bit. Starting to add a little bit of noise in there. Let's add a bit more bolt noise. Drag that up. That's better. What if we add a little bit of wrinkle in there as well? A bit more. It's looking a little too uniform. Going to undo that. That's not bad. What if we bring this now below raise again? Well, it's really blown out there, isn't it? And that's because of the glow. I think it's better when it doesn't have any rays on it. What about if we change the start color? Something a little less bright. I want it to be pretty subtle, but I just want to make it a little bit more readable. That's not bad. See, the R is starting to look good. We've got this part of the R from all of the background layers, and we're just filling in some of the areas that make it unreadable if they're not there. I think I'll come down and turn off the frequency, or turn down the frequency of the atmosphere. Right click and reset that. I'm not even sure whether the glow is actually working. Maybe I'll just, let's see, bring that down to 0 again. Okay, what about if we add an adjustment layer and we put Ultra Glow over everything? Ooh, that's looking really nice there, isn't it? Adds a real sort of misty, foggy look. So let's increase the afterglow amount. Yeah, I'm liking that. And let's decrease the threshold, the primary glow. We've got to be careful we don't blow the whole thing out. That's really starting to blow that out. Let's see. Glow width we'll bring down. No, that's not what we want. Let's bring that threshold back up, 0.5. Yeah, I do like that. That looks really good. What if we add a bit of color in here? It gives a kind of creepy green glow. We make the, I don't want add threshold. Let's see. Make that green as well. Moving into Swamp Thing territory here. I think that'll be better, a little bit brighter. Once again, just experimenting here. It's not bad. Gonna undo that. I prefer it like that. And if I was going to colorize it, I'd add the colorization over the top. What if I brought that right up, gradient multi, and just turn that on? Yeah, because that can colorize it if that's right at the top. If I wanted to do that, I'm going to turn that off for now. But I think it's pretty close. I'll just select this text again, and what I'm going to do is, what does invert look like? It's going to be black. It's going to be impossible to see. Well, not totally impossible, but it doesn't quite work. So turn that off. And let's see. I know we tried distort glow, but I'm going to try that once more. Sorry, distort blur. That's not making a lot of difference. I'll just change the Ultra Zap bolt thickness or bolt width back to 5. Yeah, we're not getting much of an effect at all on that. Okay, so distort blur is not quite doing it. I'm going to delete that and we'll just use distort. So if I choose layer 9 and choose effects and masks, just going to solder that for a moment. And let's see, just crank up some of these values. Starting to break that up. What if we make this 15? Oh, that's looking a little better, isn't it? And of course, because we're using the Sapphire 9 text, which has the animated Ultra Zap, it's going to break up this foreground layer with the same movement. We're trying to integrate this foreground layer with the background layers. Definitely helping. Sometimes it's good just to crank the amount a lot. Let's just bring that actually down to 0 blur lens. Okay, so that's definitely not helping. What about if we double it, 180? And this is what it's all about, just applying the effect and experimenting with different values. Let's bring the amount up, make that 30. And I'll turn that off just for now. See what we're getting without it. Wow, that really goes crazy, doesn't it? What if we use a lens the same way? Okay, that's actually restricting the amount, so we'll turn that off. Just reset, rotate, warp direction. Okay. And solo. I think I preferred that on. Just want to see what happens if we invert the matte. Yeah, it gives me way too much. Okay. Matte use alpha, see if that changes anything. Okay, way too much again. I wonder if, let's see, leave that one there. I wonder if we duplicated this layer, and D, brought that up above that. Okay, so now that's sitting above that white text, the white stroke text. So it's, the white text is sort of sandwiched in between, like it's, you know, being enveloped by these branches, which is quite good. And this is where doing pre-renders actually is really quite helpful, but we've got a lot of depth in here now. I'm quite liking that. Just rename this one. Always good to name your layers. And just drop the threshold. See if this helps at all. Yeah, that's pretty good actually. Maybe with the color, just bring that down as well. Okay, I think that'll do for now. That gives you sort of some idea about how I approach developing these kinds of looks. Go ahead and keep playing with it and see if you can make it look even better. Maybe try adding some keyframes for the bolt length parameter on that top text to have it draw on. If you're not using Sapphire, be sure to visit borisfx.com and download a demo. You can also find a lot of other Sapphire tutorials and tutorials for all of the other BorisFX products on borisfx.com. For now, this is John Dickinson for BorisFX. Have fun, and I'll see you in another tutorial.